we live? Okay, great.
Good day.
Larry Girardi, are you on the line?
Yes, I am on the line. I'm having some issues, so I have to come in by phone.
You're at 6604, I assume then.
That's me.
Okay, thanks. In 1 minute, we'll be live on show. I've got it, Madison.
Oh, okay,
From Nancy.
okay.
We're live.
We're live on show. Am I?
No,
So I want to welcome everybody to our council meeting, the last one of the year. To begin, I want to just wish the community the best of the holiday season. I hope everybody has a great holiday season and is able to, as best they can in the context of our public health advice, enjoy the holiday season. On that note, I want to thank everybody in the community for continuing to make an effort to stem the spread of COVID-19 in our community. I think we're doing pretty well. And as long as we keep following public health advice, I think we'll continue to do pretty well. We see vaccines, or a small number of vaccines are now in Canada, and some have begun to be administered. And hopefully we'll see an increase in that activity over the months to come, and a vaccine widely spread early in 2021. I want to thank our broadcasting partners for broadcasting our meeting, and our reporting partners for reporting on it. We appreciate that attention and coverage. Madam Clerk, you can start the meeting, please.
Under agenda item 1, a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian, resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of November 30, 2020, and budget meetings of November 30, 2020, and December 7, 2020 be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried. Council, before we get into declaring conflicts and approving the agenda, I need to note for public purposes that item 7.7.2, Horizon Landing's request for a ministerial zoning order, will not continue on the agenda. On Friday afternoon, Councillor Hollingsworth had called me and identified to me that she had determined she had a conflict on the matter. As council is aware, she was the seconder on the matter. As a result of that telephone conversation, I emailed all of you to determine if any of you were willing to second the motion. I followed up on Saturday with Councillor Scott and asked Councillor Scott if he was in communications with anybody that would be seconding the motion, and to let us know. As of today, we do not have any indication from Councillor Scott there's a seconder from the motion. We also have not heard from any of you independent councillors that you'd be seconding the motion. As a result, the motion doesn't have a seconder, and the motion, the material that is attached to it, will be withdrawn from the agenda and not form part of tonight's agenda. So when the clerk reads the motion for approval of the agenda, it will be as amended. If any of you do have conflicts in the matter, the conflicts do not have to be declared because the matter is not proceeding. Madam Clerk?
I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth, resolved that the agenda for December 14, 2020 City Council meeting as amended be approved.
All in favor? The motion is carried.
Under agenda item 5.1, Sault Ste. Marie Community Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan 2020-2030, Emily Cormier, the Climate Change Coordinator with Future Sault Ste. Marie, is on the call.
Welcome to council, Emily.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Perfect. Thank you. So for those watching at home who don't know, my name is Emily Cormier, and this evening I will be presenting the City of Sault Ste. Marie's Community Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan 2020 to 2030. Before I begin, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge some of the stakeholders who've been such an instrumental part for this 1.5-year project. This list is by no means complete, but I would like to just extend my thanks to a couple of folks who I'll read now. Thank you to Algoma Steel, the PUC, Garden River First Nation, Algoma Public Health, Clean North, and thank you to the many City of Sault Ste. Marie staff who've been involved in this project. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the funder of this project, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Next slide, please. Before I dive into an overview of the plan, I just wanted to bring forward a couple of insights regarding climate change. Climate change is something that we hear about a lot. We hear about it in the media, we hear about it in social media, and it truly is the defining issue of our time. We have about 10 years to really limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius below pre-industrial levels, or face irreversible economic, environmental, and social impacts. There is an opportunity here, however. As you can see, for every dollar invested in climate change mitigation, we save $3 to $5 in recovery costs. Clean innovation is also a fast-growing market, set to be valued worth $2.5 trillion by 2022. From a reputational standpoint, it is also very opportune. As you can see here, Vancouver's green brand is valued at $31 billion. So as much as this plan addresses the environment, it also addresses the economy. Next slide, please. There are a variety of methodologies that can be used in developing a climate change action plan. The City of Sault Ste. Marie opted to use the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Partners for Climate Protection program. This program has over 400 members across Canada, and it guides them through a 5-step milestone process with the ultimate goal of implementing a climate change action plan. The City of Sault Ste. Marie completed milestone 1 in February of this year with the completion of the GHG emissions inventory. If approved, this plan will complete milestones 2 and 3 and lay the groundwork for milestones 4 and 5 of the methodology. Next slide, please. I wanted to take a moment as well to highlight some of the great sustainability efforts that the municipality has been involved in over the years. This diagram highlights a series of plans, initiatives, and programs. Specifically, the Green Committee has been around since 2007. They've done a lot of great work. Also, the corporate GHG emissions inventory was first completed in 2009. And of course, the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, which is mandated by the province. All of these plans do address sustainability in one shape or form, but other than the corporate emissions inventory, they don't address climate change head on, which really reiterated the need for this project. The City of Sault Ste. Marie has also been working on climate change adaptation work as shown in the climate change risk assessment, which was completed in February of this year. Next slide, please. So diving into the plan here, the community GHG reduction plan was developed using a 3-tiered approach. The first phase, as I mentioned, was the community emissions inventory, and this wrapped up in the early part of this year. The second stage was the stakeholder consultations, which wrapped up in the spring. And we used both of these stages, the insights obtained, to create the plan itself. The plan is comprised of 60 actions, 14 of which are already in progress, and they include objectives, responsibilities, timelines, and performance measures. Each section of the plan is also furthered by a list of supporting programs, policies, and legislation, as well as funding and financing opportunities. Energy efficiency is at the core of this plan, which aligns very well with the recently completed Sault Ste. Marie third-party service review, which estimates that energy efficiency can reduce energy costs by about $100,000 a year. This was completely bang on for 2020, as energy savings, incentives, as well as utility sponsorship resulted in approximately $106,000. Next slide, please. So just as a refresher here, you can see this is a reminder about what our emissions inventory looked like. Based on 2017 baseline data, the City of Sault Ste. Marie emitted approximately 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. 1% of emissions were from municipal operations, with the majority of emissions coming from fleet and equipment. The remainder of community emissions were the larger portion of the inventory, with the majority coming from the built environment, specifically the use of industrial natural gas. The second highest source of emissions came from on-road transportation, which is very common throughout the rest of the province. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the second phase of the GHG reduction plan were stakeholder consultations. So this is where we went out in the community and we asked residents and businesses what were some opportunities and challenges they saw with regards to reducing emissions. I'm pleased to say that we really initiated a rather robust approach to our outreach activities, and we reached over 300 participants who were able to provide feedback. Of note here, we had an open house. We consulted with 17 stakeholders one-on-one. We had 3 surveys that we administered to youth, residents, as well as the city's Green Committee. And we had 4 community pop-up consultations pre-COVID, where we were able to access insights from folks who may not have been able to attend the open house. Next slide, please. So what did we hear? Some of the benefits that were identified in our consultations were really the need to increase awareness about climate change. So really understanding that the energy that we use every day to heat our homes and to get to and from work and school do produce emissions. Emissions also have the opportunity to save money and support local businesses in food production, as well as increase waste diversion. Some of the opportunities that were identified were to increase transit ridership, as well as the adoption of electric vehicles. Energy conservation and retrofits were really identified as a core pillar, as well as increasing and maintaining our green space and urban forest canopy. Some of the barriers identified in the plan were we really have limited resources focused on sustainability here in Sault Ste. Marie. And even though energy efficiency projects are ideal, they can sometimes be a bit difficult to obtain due to high capital costs. We also have fairly limited density in our community at the moment, so we have a very high reliance on personal vehicle use. As far as priorities, energy management in all existing assets and new builds should be key, as well as continuing to consult with local industry to really understand and perhaps partner with them on their planned GHG reduction projects, as well as encouraging green job development and landfill waste diversion. Next slide, please. So the plan itself is broken down into 7 key sectors based on emission sources, as well as reduction action opportunities. So the sectors are buildings and energy, looking at the community as well as municipal emissions, transportation and waste, green space, economic development, and municipal leadership. As required under, or as we can voluntarily do under milestone 2 of the PCP program, the city has opted to create a target for emissions reduction. And the city's goal for GHG reduction is net zero by 2050. The city will take a staged approach to achieve this goal and will focus on a GHG reduction target of 10% corporate and 5% community between 2020 and 2030, with an increasing scale of reduction target between 2030 and 2050. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight that in addition to the 7 sectors identified in the plan, there were a series of guiding principles that align with emissions mitigation action that were extrapolated from the community consultations. And these really highlight a series of reoccurring opportunities that really can integrate into our climate change action across multiple sectors. So as you can see here, climate action can help with affordability by reducing energy costs and improving for access to economical housing, accountability, ensuring that we have a sustainable future for our next generations, increasing education and awareness, as well as community pride by increasing community well-being, as well as economic development through clean technology business development and even ecotourism. We'll protect our environment and habitat by protecting species at risk and our forests from climate impacts, and also improve community health and access to food security. Next slide, please. So as I said, this plan has 60 actions, and they're rather robust, but you highlight the priorities, they can really be divided into 2 key sectors. So the first pillar really is climate change capacity. And we've got some great progress on this with the establishment of the new Environmental Sustainability Committee. So next steps would include appointing this committee and holding their first meeting. Also, it would be a good idea to create a climate information webpage on the city website, sort of as a one-stop shop for climate information for the community. Continue exploring budgeting and funding requirements, in particular for the year one priorities, as well as undertaking a youth-led environmental sustainability community project and governance and leadership. So really ensuring that city policies and programs align with supporting the GHG reduction plan. This plan cannot be implemented by focusing on just one department. It truly is a operation-wide endeavor. The second pillar of priorities, of course, is GHG emissions reduction. So really focusing here on prioritizing energy efficiency retrofits, as well as zero emission fleet opportunities. A priority will also be to summarize departmental initiatives and actions by each city department. Increasing tree planting and conducting an urban tree canopy study to also understand our carbon offset potential should also be a priority, as well as exploring the possibility of developing a community retrofit program and streamlining the city's mandatory energy reporting process. Next slide, please. The plan identifies a series of internal and external financing and funding opportunities. From an internal standpoint, the city can access federal gas tax funding that can be allocated to infrastructure projects, community energy systems, public transit, studies and training, as well as waste reduction. The city also recently allocated $50,000 from the Community Development Fund for green initiatives that nonprofits and city departments can apply to for projects that reduce emissions, improve energy efficiency, and improve upon water quality. Other ideas could include developing a corporate internal revolving energy fund, which would use savings from energy retrofits, for example, and use those savings to be invested into other green initiatives. Another opportunity would be to look at developing a local improvement charge for energy efficiency projects. This was recently updated to the Ontario Municipal Act in 2012, and it basically is a low interest retrofit loan tied to a residential property. From an external standpoint, it's exciting to see as we move forward into the COVID-19 recovery, a lot of the stimulus is really geared towards green growth. $10 billion, for example, has been earmarked for zero emission buses, $2.5 billion for clean power, as well as energy efficient building retrofits. Not included in this plan was the recently updated Canadian Environmental Plan, A Healthy Environment and Healthy Economy, which was launched last Friday, which also earmarks about $3 billion towards tree planting. The COVID-19 resiliency funding has funding available for energy efficiency retrofits, active transportation, as well as tree planting. And the Enbridge and IESO conservation programs, which have been around for a while, are still around and are a great opportunity to finance energy efficiency retrofits. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund funds municipal projects that are green for pilots, studies, as well as capital projects. And since their inception, they have spent about $862 million on municipal green projects. And last but not least, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has launched a community efficiency financing program, which allows municipalities to develop a community retrofit program using the local improvement charge model. I'd also like to highlight that the city should also consider adding a criteria to capital and operating budget requests that would review requests as well as based on their impact to environmental sustainability. Next slide, please. So as part of the implementation process, a variety of scenarios were reviewed. As you can see here, some of their benefits and limitations are identified. However, it is recommended that the city assign responsibility to the Environmental Sustainability Committee, which is already in progress, to review and oversee the implementation of the plan. It's also recommended that a staff resource be assigned or established to further create a culture of sustainability within the organization. Next slide, please. So as far as next steps go, it's important to review the plan and review next year's projects aimed at reducing corporate and community energy use and emissions. In the plan, there is a section focused on the top 10 priorities for year one. Some of these projects are already underway, and they'll really lay the foundation for more complex projects in the future. We'll get the environmental sustainability to hold their first committee meeting to really talk about their strategies and priorities for the first year, and continue looking for budget and funding requirements for those year one priorities. As I mentioned, this is a 5-milestone framework that the city has used. So upon approval of this plan, the next 2 stages will be implementation and monitoring progress and reporting results. It is recommended to review the results fairly regularly to make sure that we're staying on top of our tasks. And I'd like to conclude my presentation this evening by saying that this plan should be viewed as a living document. As I mentioned, the Canadian Climate Change Plan was recently updated last Friday. This is a very fast-moving sector with a lot of stimulus funding and new technology developments happening fairly regularly. So it's important that this plan be updated and adapted regularly to acknowledge changing technology, funding, and legislative initiatives. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you, Emily, for that report. It was very substantial. I certainly appreciated the work that went into it, and I was glad to see that we have that work done now. I do have some questions here. The first one is Councillor Gardy, then Councillor Hilsinger.
Thanks, Emily. That was great. I just had a question about how our emission reduction targets through 2030 stack up to any neighboring communities, Sudbury, Timmins, etc., may have, if they have them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, thank you for your question. Our neighbors in Northern Ontario, some of them do have some climate action plans. There really is no set in stone measure for this. You can have, for example, like the city of Sudbury, they do have a plan for net zero emissions by 2050. Their plan is very substantial and recognizes the need to review and evaluate it on a regular basis. And then you have other communities like the city of Timmins, for example, which has a very similar preliminary target as us, which is 10% corporate and 5% community in the next 10 years. This is based on a recommendation by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Partners for Climate Protection Program, which encourages new members to adopt that 10% and 5% target within their first 10 years.
Perfect. That's it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Emily. That is one of the most robust and fulsome reports I've ever read. I'm going to have to read it a few more times, I think, to really get it to sink in for me. But it's very exciting, I think, for our community to have this as a further, I guess, starting point or launch point to do better with our environment. My question is just a little bit further to what Councillor Gardy asked. I do understand that there was a recommendation for cities who were starting out to start at that 5% and 10% level, but it doesn't seem like a lot. And I'm wondering if you could just briefly comment a little more on that. And do you feel that we could have stretch goals or work towards having more of an impact in this next 10 years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hilsinger. Thank you for your question. The plan, as I said, is designed to be a bit of a living document. As our target states, there is room to grow. Our target really is based on the outstanding energy efficiency retrofits here at the municipality, but it also leaves room for other projects such as addressing things like zero emission transportation, as well as green spaces through the use of tree planting. There is room for growth, and I think this plan should be looked at as something like training wheels, if you will. It is a really good foundation, but it leaves windows open. It addresses some of the interesting initiatives going on in Canada, such as the National Hydrogen Strategy, for example, happening on a federal basis, but there's also a paper being developed in Ontario as well. So there is definitely room to expand upon these targets, most certainly. And I think it will be important to continue keeping our eyes open at funding opportunities, pilot programs, considering partnerships as well with other organizations within the community who are looking towards projects that reduce their emissions as well.
Okay, Councillor Hilsinger, do you have anything else?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Do we have anything else for Emily, Council? So Emily, thank you for your time today. I think it's great work, and I think it's really positive that we are now in earnest doing this type of work. And your report, I'm sure, will lead to growth and change. And I think we will start making some of the decisions that we have to make sure we reduce our CO2 emissions. So thank you, Emily, very much. Council, you've got the motion in front of you. I think the clerk had read it prior to Emily beginning. Am I correct about that, clerk?
I have not read it yet. I will read it now, and it is open for voting. It's a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth, resolved that the report of the Climate Change Coordinator dated December 14, 2020 concerning Sault Ste. Marie Community Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan 2020-2030 be received, and that Council approve the adoption of the Sault Ste. Marie Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan. Further, that Council approve the goal for greenhouse gas reduction plans of net zero emissions by 2050 and support taking a staged approach to achieve this goal, focusing on a greenhouse gas reduction target of 10% corporate and 5% community between 2020 to 2030, with an increasing scale of reduction target between 2030 and 2050. Further, that staff be directed to work to achieve the goals and actions outlined in the plan, with any municipal monetary requests referred to future budgets.
All in favor? Motion is carried unanimously.
And that will bring us to consent. I do have on agenda item 6.15, there's an amendment brought forth to that motion, so I will accept that from consent. Under consent, it's a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that all items listed under date December 14, 2020, agenda item 6, consent agenda, save it, except agenda item 6.15, be approved as recommended.
Okay, Council, so 6.15 is accepted from consent. So on consent, I have Councillor Christian going first. Councillor Christian, what are your matters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to start, I've got three of them. I'd like to start with 6.18, reduce speed in school zones. I threw you to Mr. Ramil. First of all, I want to thank you very much for the report. I think the recommendations in the report are very good, and I think it's something that was long overdue. So I appreciate you doing that and working it through. I do have one question though, and it relates to White Pines. In your report, you're essentially saying that White Pines is excluded from the list because of their civic address. My question is, was any thought given to the fact that, you know, most of the students that exit that school property, and I know this firsthand having taught there, that they exit onto Daisy Road. Is there any thought about reducing the speed limit in that area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. Yes, I guess that might have been an oversight in the report. It would be a reduced speed school zone on Daisy, not on Trunk Road.
Okay, so then in fact we are going to do that?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes.
Okay, that's my only question. That one stood out to me, and I appreciate your response. That's the only.
Sorry, Councillor Christian. Anybody else in 6.18? Councillor Christian, I took you to say you were done on 6.18. Was I correct there?
Correct. That's correct, sir.
So I see a number of hands in 6.18. I'll start with Councillor Gardy. Yeah. Then Councillor Scott, Hilsinger, and Shoemaker. So Councillor Gardy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Specifically, I'm looking forward to improvements in and around Cora Collegiate, as there are a lot of students who walk to and from Cora, often at lunchtime. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Ramil, you and I had discussed the possibility of a pedestrian crossover to service Cora Collegiate to traverse Old Gully Bay Road. Would you be able to comment on that at all, or talk about it as, or mention to me what you had last week?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, I think you mean Gooley Avenue.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, and that remains a high priority location for us to put a PXO or pedestrian crossover. It wouldn't be done as under this particular program, but we're looking forward to building some more of these as the budget is available and work them into our capital program.
Perfect. Well, I think it's important. What is important is I noticed that you had mentioned in the report the recommendation to slow down speeds in and around schools, throughout the year. I think it's a good habit for drivers to get in and around schools. I'm hopeful that council will support that part of the report. And I was glad to hear that the crossover is in consideration. I heard from a father, even though it's outside of this report, I would encourage staff to strongly consider a crossover for Gooley Avenue. I heard from a father and a couple of other people. There was a child involved in an accident about a week or so ago. I've also been told there's a few close calls with students kind of darting across Gooley Avenue. So moving forward, I hope we can shore things up in and around Cora. Thanks very much, Mr. Ramil. I appreciate the report.
Okay, so next we have Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take the opportunity to make a comment. It's really great to have this report come back, and I wanted to really just encourage people. Pedestrians and cyclists need special attention, and it would be really great if just as a community we could just slow down. This is going to be very helpful in front of schools to make it safer for kids who are walking or anyone who's walking or cycling. But in general, there's areas I've had a lot of complaints, numerous from residents in my ward who are just concerned that people are driving too fast, and it makes it unsafe to be on the side of the road, especially where there's no sidewalks. So it's just a general message. Be careful in front of schools, heed this new speed limit, and please just slow down.
Okay, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's mostly comments, if that's okay.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead.
Perfect. Simply great to see this come back. I know that Councillor Gardy and I put this motion forward last September 2019. We had actually received a lot of concerns, as Councillor Gardy had mentioned, around the Cora area prior, around RM Moore, a lot of areas out in Ward 5, and that kind of brought us to the idea that maybe we should do something to reduce the speeds. And so we looked into it, we put together the motion, and staff came back with an awesome report. I think it's fantastic. I hope that hope we can get this taken care of. It doesn't look like it's going to be that much financially as well. And I think that safety is very important for our students. So I'm happy to see this come back so relatively quickly and completely as well. There isn't any areas I could think of that are missed. So it's great to see. Great report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Rumiel. I noticed the recommendation in the report is to implement the reduced speed zones at schools throughout the entire year. Sorry, and I'm just wondering the justification for putting it on throughout the entire year when obviously schools are closed in the summer and don't operate and 24 hours a day as well, whereas schools only operate about 8 or 9 hours a day. Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. In discussion with engineering and public works staff, the thought was that these are outdoor spaces as well as schools that the community and the neighborhoods use. There's soccer fields, baseball diamonds, basketball courts, those types of facilities that are well used, and slowing speed down in those areas was thought to be a good thing. The other thought was that driver behavior is highly influenced by routine, and keeping it 40 kilometers an hour 24/7 all year long, that people would just be used to it and would be observed better by drivers. And the last thought was that they're very small areas, like they're only a few hundred meters in length on either side of the school. So it's not really that much of an inconvenience to slow down in those short areas. It'd probably only be a few moments extra in your drive. Those are the thoughts.
Okay, thanks. And obviously, speed signs will be posted, obviously, but in some school areas, there's also flashing lights. Will those be implemented throughout, or will those be just continued at the ones where they already are?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, this would override that in our community. We wouldn't be using those are related to time of day speed reductions, so they would be removed and just replaced with 40-kilometer-hour signs with the school zone pentagon.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, anybody else in 6.18? Councillor Christian, you said you had 3 matters, so we're coming back to you for your second one.
Yes. 6.24, the modular retail units for downtown, through you to Mr. Turco. Mr. Turco, again, thanks for the report. I think this is an exciting opportunity, and I think the city will really welcome this. A couple questions, though. Let's start off with anticipated timelines. When do you see, if approved, when do you see us taking possession after ordering? And when do you think the first ones might be placed? I know that's a bit hypothetical, but you must have an idea, a plan, or a hope at least.
Mr. Mayor, it's Don McConnell. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Turco tonight.
Okay.
I'd be happy to answer Councillor Christian's question with regards to the timing. We're looking forward to putting these out, if at all possible, next summer. The question, of course, is with the procurement process. We're not sure what the time frame will be once we make a decision with the product to go with, or council makes a decision with the product to go with, and we finalize the order. We're not sure how long that would take. So we are going to try our best for next summer. Failing that, it would be the following summer.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. McConnell. I guess, can you speak to the issue of electrical and plumbing? Obviously, for the public here, we'd have to place these, I would think, in locations where we would have easy access for hookups, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, that's correct. We are working now on the design of the new downtown plaza to ensure that we have electrical and water hookups at appropriate locations. We already have a number of those hookups, and I don't see any problems with it at the Roberta Bondar Pavilion at that area, and with other locations. We'll just sort of have to deal with that as we go along. That will be a consideration, of course, as to where we're going to place these.
Okay. Do we have any idea at this point how much it costs for a retrofitted shipping container versus a custom-made unit?
Through you again, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we haven't gone out to get costs yet, but we're looking at up to $40,000 per unit. These are sizable units. They do, half of them will have kitchen facilities in there to meet health unit standards. So, and they all have to meet building code requirements. So it's fairly complex. Our game plan was to go out and simply invite people who do retrofitted shipping containers as well as build new to bid. And then we can sit down and with council, we'll evaluate that, make a report to council, and council can make a decision as to which way they want to go based on what's the best value.
Thank you. Are there any, would there ever be a rezoning application or consideration when it comes to these units, or do these things even fall into that category?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they do fall under the Ontario Building Code, and as a result, they would come with zoning, but they are temporary structures as opposed to permanent structures. The suggested locations that we've identified would all allow this type of a use. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a great idea. I think it provides a lot of flexibility and opportunity for businesses. And I think it might allow us to showcase certain businesses, especially for the cruise ship industry. I certainly hope that we could do something by Roberta Bondar Park, because I think that would be a great amenity for those cruise ships that come in, seeing that we're trying to expand that market. So thank you very much. That's it for my questions on that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I have Councillor Vezo-Allen, Councillor Bruni, Councillor Dufour, then Councillor Nero, and then Councillor Shoemaker. So Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, of the locations listed, and the report is called the Modular Retail Units for Downtown, has there been consideration, or is it possible, I don't know what the funding parameters are, to have these throughout the city? I was thinking such as Bellevue Park, Hiawatha, especially with the mountain bike trails or snowshoers in the wintertime. The James Street area, there's been, I think that this would fit well with the James Street improvement plan. So are there restrictions due to the funding mechanism of where these units can be located?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. The funding for this is coming from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation in a large part, and it is limited to the downtown. We do see this as a pilot project. There's a couple of considerations. One, as Councillor Christian asked earlier, we need to put them in a location where we can service these units, both with water and electricity. So that does limit some locations. Obviously in the downtown, it's easier to find those locations than it is in some of the other areas. But there's nothing to prevent the project from being expanded in the future. I mean, if we find that it's very successful and there's a demand to expand it, we could expand it either in the downtown or to other locations in town. But at the moment, the plan is to put these within the downtown with the NOHFC funding.
Thank you. And in the report, it states that the rent would be nominal rent to cover costs. Now, has there been investigations into comparables? So what people might pay for a booth at the Mill Market per se? I know right now at the Bush Plain, they're doing small market-ish things with rental tables. In terms of that, have you done sort of a, kind of what the market can bear in terms of rental costs for vendors?
Not at this point. Sort of the plan moving forward is to work with the suppliers. We should be able to get fairly good estimates from them as to what the anticipated costs for electricity, for water, if that's used, as well as we have some costs in the fact moving these into place would be. We are going into this with the approach that it will be the lowest possible price. We are not looking at this as a profit-making initiative. We're looking at this as a cover our costs initiative. But at this point, do we have those costs? No, we will get that though. We will have a better idea, I think, after we tender this.
Okay, and my last question, and I previously sent an email regarding this, would be insurance. So I know a lot of the vendors are sort of small artisans. I had a small pop-up today with a small vendor that just operates an online store. So if we're looking at, sort of what is the recommended in terms of liability insurance, which city solicitor and the risk management have at 5 million. And just from experience with, people having the patio seasons and things like that, 5 million liability, I think, would be very cost prohibitive for a lot of these vendors, and probably vendors would not be able to even achieve that. So there been any discussion with legal and with the risk management team in terms of how insurance is going to be dealt with? And also, is it something that possibly the Downtown Association could cover with their umbrella liability policy, depending on where the containers are located?
Certainly, through you, Mayor Provenzano, to Councillor Brezoel, and I have had discussions with our city solicitor, Ms. Fields, on this, and perhaps I could just refer the question to her.
Good evening, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brezoel. A lot of it is unknown right now. I think our risk manager would say on a best practice, we would start at 5 million that stays consistent with other agreements in the city. But it really would be, we'd have to take a look at just what's going on, what are the risk factors, and we would want to be flexible with that. So, is there a situation where we've got somebody just using it for a weekend and they're selling artwork? That would be obviously a different risk than someone cooking or selling alcohol if they're going to carry on for the whole summer versus a weekend. So we'd want to stay flexible with that and work with the other departments to come up with something that would be fair, but still protect the city.
Thank you. I think this needs to be flexible, because a lot of these small vendors, it's not a requirement if they're renting, even a space within the bush plane or if they're at the market. So because they're covered under that facilities liability policy. So I think we really need to take a look at that, because I think for a lot of what your target vendor group is, a $5 million liability policy would not be something they would be able to manage. And so I think, that needs to be a very important critical piece with the staff moving forward. I think it is exciting. I support this idea. I think it really enhances what we can provide for visitors, and especially along the waterfront around Bondar. But I think we need to be realistic about what our target vendor group can and is able to do in terms of insurance. So thank you very much, Mr. McConnell and Ms. Fields. I don't have any other questions.
Councilor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. McConnell. How would these vendors be picked? I mean, if, between advertising and if 12 people come forward, 12 businesses, and you only have 6 vendors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a key question, and we've struggled with it a bit. We are planning on setting up a committee. We will see where the interests are and hopefully have a variety of different vendors at each location, or at the location, so they're not all the same. And we want to get back to you on that, because that does require some further thought, Councillor Bruni. We're aware of the situation. What happens if you get 2 people that both want to sell ice cream?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to have 2 people that both sell ice cream. Can we break it up? A couple of months for one fellow, a couple of months for the other. Those are kind of the logistics of the thing that needs to be worked out yet.
Okay, thank you. So when would this come back to council? How long would it take for the RFP to go out for the containers?
In all likelihood, if we send it out in January, allowed a month to get back, probably March. We'd be sometime in March back to you, because we need to give people enough time heads up that they can get ready for the summer, if we can get these for the summer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councilor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through yourself to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, has there been any consultation with the DTA or with potential vendors yet?
The DTA is aware of this. Several vendors have contacted us to express their interest in this. We are going to go out with them, and we will be consulting with them before we put together our operational policies on this as to who we have, what the costs are, the insurance, all of those matters. Yes. So we have had some contact with them, but we wanted to make sure we could get these units in place.
Okay, will we have more of an idea of what the consultation and the contact has been like by the time the RFP comes back to council?
We can certainly do that. What we're yes, we can certainly do that. We really look at those people as sort of our partners moving forward. You know, the Enterprise Center, Millworks, some of our own staff, the downtown staff, the Career Center, Local Immigration Partnership. There's a series of different businesses that we've had some contact with. I shouldn't say business, different organizations. And we'd really like to work to them to see if we can sort of help the entrepreneurial spirit that sits out there.
Well, that's great to hear, Mr. McConnell. I think probably one of the best successes of an endeavor like this would be to see the incubation of a new business that would then move to a permanent retail space downtown where we do have significant issues with vacancy. And if this could kind of get people off of the ground, I think it would be seen as a huge success by the community. With that, Councillor Vezo-Allen has asked most of my questions. But I would like to just leave the comment that I think that the affordability piece, you know, with an incubation being our best case kind of scenario, ensuring that the entry to these units is affordable and is accessible to someone who maybe just be starting out, and to make sure that business piece works, I think is really important to have this program be a success. So thanks very much, Mr. McConnell.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, the report and in the report and in your comments as well, I think you referred that we want to get going this summer, but you're also looking at use that may happen in the winter as well. Is that correct, that we want to use these units in all seasons?
That's correct. Yes.
So once we establish a location, we wouldn't be moving and storing these pop-up units. They would stay where you're going to place them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, the intent is that they are movable. We should be able to move these with a good sized forklift. That's good part of the criteria so that we can move them around. Obviously, we're not going to be moving these on a day-to-day basis, but certainly, for instance, during the winter, we have our skating trail down here at Clerk Park, very popular. We want to make sure that during the cruise season, we have some units down at Roberta Bondar Park. So we do have the ability to move them. We do see, though, that the demand is likely going to be much greater during the summer than in the winter. Hopefully we're wrong and there's strong demand all year round.
Okay, so based on that answer, do we presently have the capability of moving them ourselves? Like
I believe so. If not, there is a contractor in town that can.
Okay, so that cost would be worked into the expense part of it.
Yeah.
And if we're not moving them, and they're not required, let's say at a site, let's say the downtown plaza, for example. There's an event going on where maybe we don't get vendors for these things and we could use the extra room. Would we move them somewhere else? Would we consider those kinds of things to make more room, or once they're at the downtown plaza, they're going to remain there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, the intent is that once we put several up to 6 in the downtown plaza, that they would stay there most of the time. Like, we're not going to be moving them because of one single event. I don't think the effort involved with that kind of matches what the event would be. And they're being placed in the new downtown plaza so as to not be in the way of performances on the stage, that sort of thing, to not interfere with people who are, you know, doing other activities, skating, whatever it may be at the plaza, that they would be complementary to those, but certainly not in the way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Next, we have Councillor Shoemaker, then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. McConnell. You had mentioned these units cost approximately $40,000. So would it be fair to say that for the RFP amount, we'd be getting 5, maybe 6 on a good day?
We're going to attempt to get 6. through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that is the intent moving forward. We don't really know until we get the prices in, and there may be a fair variance on the price for what you get. That's why we're kind of going out there with a request for proposal, and then we can sit down and see where really is our best value here.
Okay, thank you. My only other question is actually a suggestion. I would hope that if these are set up near the cruise ship dock, Port of Sault Ste. Marie, I think we're calling it, that there are city branded products for sale in some capacity in one of them. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Thank you through your worship to Mr. McConnell. First of all, I support the idea, and actually I have two questions. Can you just touch base on which communities have you reached out to understand the policies they're using, the selection process, the variety of businesses that could go into these, maintenance and hours? Which communities have you reached out that already have this in place to gain a better education on how they make it happen, how they make it work? I know Detroit uses them. I know Las Vegas and Montreal, but what communities have you reached out to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have a comprehensive list. I wasn't the one doing the research, but I know we did talk to Toronto, Montreal, Cornwall, and Petawawa, among others.
Okay. And can you comment, I know you didn't do the report, but do you know if they touched on policies that we can probably borrow? And did you touch on maintenance? And also, did you touch on, you mentioned selection process might be difficult, but again, do you know if we're going to be borrowing their policies instead of reinventing the wheel and so forth?
Through you again, Mr. Mayor, yes, all of those communities do have policies, and we will be relying on those as well as others, as well as the expertise of our staff in other departments.
Okay. And one last point, I know that you are not at this time really considering moving them, but just a comment, it is a wonderful project. I hope that you'll consider that in the winter to maybe potentially put one at the Hub Trail, because we are a winter community. And potentially, you mentioned the ice trails in Clerk Park, but maybe also up in Hiawatha, potentially to help them out with maybe hot chocolate and so forth. So hopefully that we do consider winter use. So wonderful idea, and I do support this. It's trendy, and it's going to give a good vibe to our community for new businesses and new entrepreneurs, especially young people. Thank you.
Okay, that exhausts my list on this matter. So a lot of interest in it. Thank you for the work, staff. Councillor Christian, your last matter.
Yes, 6.5, Mr. Mayor, the tire item.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure who I addressed.
Ask the question. So I just said the tender for tires and tire repairs. Ask the question, and the CEO will direct it where.
All right. So I was just looking at the amounts coming in, and you know, I see Cal Tire. It says certain tires tended do not meet requirements. Bus tire tread depth does not meet requirements. Are those highway standards, or are those the standards that we apply to the type of product we're looking for?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I'm not entirely sure. I'll refer it to, I see Mr. Lamming has popped up, so he can certainly answer the transit aspect of the question. And the CFO treasurer may have some input as well.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, with respect to the transit portion of the question, we travel 260,000 kilometers a year, and we rely on a heavy tread for our bus tires. The bid that was not successful was 20% less of tread. So what that means is the useful life is much shorter than the proponent we're recommending. Therefore, we either have to service earlier or replace earlier, which results in higher costs. So that would be from the transit perspective.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I also see Mr. Girardi's available and can certainly answer a question on his fleet.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm coming through on the phone. From Public Works perspective, the tires that were tendered out for, there was two types. There was retreads and there was brand new tires. When we look at these new tires, type of tire we're looking for is not a long haul tire. We're looking for a winter type tire because our trucks are doing a lot of turning. So it's a very specific tire that we'll use. We experimented in the past with retreaded tires and they just don't last. They're a harder compound and we need a softer compound, of course, for our conditions that we're operating. So that's the main reason why we are going with the tires that are listed on the tender that was successful.
So thank you. So I'm assuming then that these are the standards and requirements that we apply based on our experience and our own best practices.
To Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, that's right. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, one final question. I'm looking at the numbers, and we've got a winter drive tire and a new tire under bus tires, where the vendor that did not win had much lower costs for those particular tires. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. There's no way that we could pull those items out because there's a substantial savings if we were able to pull those out and go with the Cal Tire vendor.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, again, that goes back to the retread when I was talking about the retread as opposed to new. So we need to use a new tire as opposed to a retread.
Okay.
That's why there's some see under winter drive tire.
Right.
That would be the difference right there.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense then. So those two that are highlighted then specifically don't meet the requirements that we've established. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, council, do we have any more questions on the tire tender? Seeing none, we're going to leave consent, council, now that we're done with Councilor Christian, because it is 5:30. We do have a proponent waiting in the waiting room that we will let in, and we will go to the consent agenda. So if the deputy clerk can let in the representative from Sargent, and Madam Clerk, if you can move us to consent. Not consent, I apologize, planning. Planning. Madam Clerk, you're on mute.
You think I'd know that by now. Application A1420Z, 61 Great Northern Road, Sargent Development Sioux Limited. A motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian. Resolved that the report of the senior planner dated December 14, 2020 concerning application A1420Z be received, and that council approve the application and rezone the subject property from general commercial zone with special exception 268 to general commercial zone, with an amended special exception to permit, in addition to the uses currently permitted, the entire existing building to be occupied by office space that is specifically engaged in providing medical, social, and support services to the public, and that the legal department be directed to prepare the necessary bylaws to effect the same. Ron Sarter and Deborah Kristen are representing Sargent are on the call.
Okay, I didn't catch that second name, Madam Clerk. I understand Ron Sarter's on the call. Who else is on the call?
Deborah Christner, also with Sargent.
Thank you. Before we get to the proponents, Mr. McConnell, can I ask you to give a summary of this application for the folks watching from home?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. This is the former Volkswagen dealership property on Great Northern Road at the corner of Champlain Street. The request is for rezoning to permit the Alzheimer's Society to combine their various operations into a single building. Right now they have offices, they have recreational programming, they have a day-away program at the Davy home, and the desire is to consolidate this at a single location. And this is the location. This application is recommended for approval. And as the clerk mentioned, the applicant is on the line should council have any questions for them or for me.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Sarter, did you want to make any comments or representations with respect to your application here?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, I'm Ron Sarter, and I got Deborah Christner with me. We're representing Sargent Developments, and Deborah.
We wish to thank you, Mayor Provenzano, and through you, City Council. We appreciate your consideration of our application for the rezoning of 61 Great Northern Road, and just wanted to say a couple of things, if we could, please. In the agenda documents, you've seen a letter of support from Alzheimer's Society. They're the intended tenant for this building. Alzheimer's Society is in urgent need to expand and amalgamate its locations in order to increase its services to the community in a property that's both centrally located and easily accessible. For example, a key program of Alzheimer's, the Day Away program, is currently located in a nursing home. And while a good location, it's essentially been closed since the onset of COVID. This has affected its services to the vulnerable in the community, and 61 Great Northern Road would be an independent location for them, nestled within the community, and really would benefit them in every way. So in closing, we have read the senior planner's report included, and we're pleased to comply with any stated guidelines to achieve the rezoning, and we're here to answer any questions you may have, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for that very much, Deborah. Councillors, do you have any questions for either the proponents or our Director of Planning, Councillor Shoemaker? We'll start with you, then Councillor Bezoal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, I know we have a general policy against office space outside of the downtown area, which we've made exceptions to on a couple of occasions. Does the special exemption that's being sought here limit the future use from just being a general office space? If the Alzheimer's Society ever were to leave, for example.
Well, it would have to be a similar type of use, and not necessarily the Alzheimer's, where we're not that specific. It does limit the use to an organization providing medical, social, or support services to the public. So it's not, the recommendation is not to make it specific to the Alzheimer's Society, but to make it general enough so that other similar organizations could also use the property.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But I guess it's specific enough that it can't just be general commercial office space.
That's correct. It's not just a basic office building.
Thank you. That satisfies my concern.
Next, I have Councillor Bezoal.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, probably to Ron or Deborah. I certainly understand the needs of the Alzheimer's Society since COVID hit, and know that they've had interruption in services. It says in the report that it's a long-term lease and that it will start August 2021. What is the term of the lease, if you're able to specify? And do you anticipate that they will be ready to be operational by August 2021 with all of the renovations that will need to occur?
Yeah, okay. The lease is going to be over 10 years. And yeah, and we're going to try to get it done as soon as possible, but definitely for August 1st, yeah. We'll have it ready.
Okay, thank you. 10 years at least, minimum. Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Mr. McConnell regarding the parking. Will the exit be on Blake or will it still be on Great Northern Road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the plan is that the entrance from Great Northern Road would only be an entrance, and vehicles leaving would either leave onto Blake or onto Champlain. So you'd really put a sort of a one-way drive system in place for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question is the Alzheimer's Society the only projected tenant for this building?
That's my understanding, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, that's my understanding. Perhaps Mr. Starter could confirm that?
Yes, it is. Alzheimer's, and the day away program that's at the nursing home right now.
Okay, and so they'll be occupying 100% of the office space for this building.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any other questions? You don't have any. I appreciate the development. I think it's positive for the Alzheimer's Society, and I thank Sergeant for making the effort to accommodate it. Can we have a vote on the motion then? It's in front of you, all in favor. Motion is carried, I believe, unanimously. Thank you for your time together today. Sorry, Ron. Deborah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that brings us, Madam Clerk, do you have everybody's votes?
I do. So that will take you back to consent.
That takes us back to consent. We were done with Councillor Christian. Councillor Gardy, I have you next on my list. Do you have any matters on consent?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start with 611, please.
Go ahead, 611 it is.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, if Mr. Anderson's on the line, if not, I would say Mr. Vare, I guess.
He is.
Mr. Anderson is?
He is, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Anderson, I was just hoping you could explain to the public the application for FedNor Northern Ontario Development Program for the funding of up to $500,000 and how it could specifically assist with the rural and northern immigration pilot program.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. What's happened since the rural and northern immigration pilot project has rolled out is the federal government has realized that there's some additional expenses with that program that weren't first realized when the program was released. So they've come back to a number of municipalities and through FedNor to the municipalities that are partaking in that program in Northern Ontario and offered their support for implementing the program. We've been very successful with that program to date. It's been a great program for us in terms of attracting individuals that perhaps in some instances are in the community but don't have permanent residency, or in other instances, those that are outside of the community. And again, the core function of the program is to attract skilled labor for hard to fill positions. Sault Ste. Marie is the leader in this program in terms of not only having 2 individuals actually successfully complete the application process and are now welcomed as through IRCC in the community, but also in terms of the number of applicants received. And just with that, we've received 61 applicants so far this year, and 44 of which were stemmed from international students through Sioux College and Algoma U.
Perfect. Thanks very much for that explanation.
Okay, anybody else in 611? Councillor Gardy, thank you, Travis. Councillor Gardy, your next matter.
I got one more, 6.9, and it's just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor. 2 of these initiatives, the accessible dock for kayak tours and enhancement at the Bonder dock for cruise ships, respectively, will help bolster our community's ability to take advantage of being located on the St. Mary's River. In my opinion, this is something we should continue to build on year over year, and as best as we're able to anyway. And for years, I don't think we did to the degree that we should have. It's great to see that we now have a plan to capitalize on that location. And personally, I just encourage the pursuit and hope to see more of it in the years ahead. Thanks.
Anybody else have any comments in 6.9? Seeing none, I agree with Councillor Gardy. It's a good piece of work. Councillor Gardy's done his matters. Next on my list, Councillor Vezo-Allen. Do you have any other matters in consent? None? Do any other councillors have any matters on consent?
None.
Okay, I see Councillor Scott. Thank you, Councillor Scott. You're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question on 6.6, the Urban Indigenous Hub and Housing Development Update.
Yeah, go ahead.
This would be through you to Mr. Vare. Is Mr. Vare on the line?
He is.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Ver, so the letter from the Pewating Urban Indigenous Hub mentions that the work done in phase 1 environmental site assessment that was forwarded to the city. Is that something that you could give us more information on, us as in council and the public?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. It was a report that was commissioned by the Pewating Urban Indigenous Committee. They shared a copy with the city. I'm not sure that we can share the details of the report publicly.
Okay. But is it safe to assume then that the results of that phase 1 is what kind of pushed them away from the site?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. I think there were, certainly there was no surprises that the site has contamination based on its prior uses. But it was one of the factors, as indicated in the letter, that the Pewating Urban Indigenous Council weighed upon as they decided whether to proceed with the site.
Okay. And they're still looking around locally, right? Like the hope is that they can find another site within Sault Ste. Marie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, that's correct, yes. And we'll be working with them to try and assist them to find another site for this development and see it come to fruition in the community.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
I can add to that, Councillor Scott, that I had a conversation with Mr. Marchand just this past weekend, and they're still very interested in proceeding and actively looking for other sites. So
awesome.
Staff will continue to work with them, and I've got confidence we can move this project forward.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Anybody else in 6.6? Councillor Scott, do you have any other matters from the consent agenda?
No, nothing.
That leaves us to Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, I just wanted to, on agenda item 6.8, thank the United Way for the generous donation. Obviously, masks are an ever more important part of everybody's workday, and every donation of masks goes a long way, obviously. So thank you to them.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Any other matters on consent, Council? Seeing none, we've accepted 15, so we can vote on the consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
That's correct.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. That brings us to 6:15. And maybe, Madam Clerk, I'll start with whomever, was it Councillor Shoemaker or Councillor Christian who offered the amendment? Councillor Shoemaker, so we'll start with you. We'll start with you, Councillor Shoemaker, since you had offered the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for some background on this, myself and Councillor Grandinetti had brought the motion looking to level the playing field for local improvement charges across various classes of roads a number of years ago, because at present only Class A roads are charged local improvements when they are constructed or reconstructed. An excellent report came back from Mr. Elliott, and the city clerk, I understand, was also integral in the drafting of this. Except that the result of the report would have ended up with the city having less revenue in future years from local improvement charges than we do at present. So the amendment Councillor Christian and I discussed over the weekend and put forward is to make the changes revenue neutral to the city, so that we are not bringing in any more money from the changes in the local improvement charges, but so that we are not bringing in any less either. The only other comment that I would, or the only other matter I would address is that this really does make the system a lot fairer, because as I mentioned, historically only Class A roads were being charged for construction or reconstruction. This will level the playing field across Class B and Class C roads. And this is, I would say, an excellent example of our municipality using a revenue tool at its disposal that other municipalities don't. So we often discuss that issue at council, and this is one example where we are doing something that other municipalities aren't and have been for a long time. So I think it's good to continue the process of applying local improvement charges, as is, as has come to be almost not expected, but accepted by residents.
Okay. Councillor Christian, did you, okay, so just so we're clear, everybody has the recommendation in front of them. Madam Clerk, is the amendment to the motion in front of us, the recommendation in front of us, is that also on eScribe? Do all the councillors have that amendment?
It is on eScribe. If you'd like, I'll read the motion as it first appeared, and then I'll read the amending motion.
Yeah, please do, so everybody's working for the same playbook.
So this is the original motion, and I just would add that the amendment is to change item C and to add a word to item F. The original motion was moved by Councillor Shoemaker and Hollingsworth. Resolved that the report of the Director of Engineering and City Clerk dated December 14, 2020 regarding local improvement policy be received, and that the existing procedure be amended beginning with the 2021 Capital Transportation Program to A, discontinue charging local improvements for reconstruction of sanitary sewage infrastructure, B, continue charging local improvements for construction of new sanitary infrastructure, C, and this is will be amended, continue to charge local improvements for new Class A roads and 1/2 new construction rates for reconstruction. D, begin charging local improvements for new Class B and C roads and 1/2 new construction rates for reconstruction. E, upon a sufficient petition of benefiting property owners, charge local improvements for new Class A, B, or C construction. And F, implement local improvement charges as recommended with an annual estimated CPI increase. And then the amendment by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian is resolved that the main motion be amended by replacing the words in existing paragraph C with the following. Continue to charge local improvements for new Class A roads at a rate that equals the historic local improvement and sanitary rate combined and 1/2 the new construction rates for reconstruction. And by adding the word new between the words implement and improvement in paragraph F so that it reads implement new local improvement charges as recommended with the annual CPI increase.
Okay, Council, do you have any questions about those amendments? So we're just dealing with the amendment right now. Do you have any questions about the amendment? Councillor Dufour.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit, I guess my question is, if we're recovering the cost of sanitary sewer reconstruction through the reserve, why would we still need to collect it? Like, wouldn't the revenue that we're losing just be covered by a subtraction from the sanitary reserve?
So I'm gonna, yeah, I understand the question. I'm gonna go to the city engineer here. Don, did you understand the question?
Yes, I did, Mr. Mayor. To Councillor Dufour, what's happened in the past is the revenue that was collected for sanitary sewer under the local improvement wasn't put over to the sewer surcharge. So it is revenue that affects the levy. It affects the capital budget. So I believe the amendment is intends to have this be a revenue neutral situation. So that's why the sanitary rate would be added in and blended into the new rate.
Okay, would it be a little clearer if the new rate was just still simply like didn't have any reference to the sanitary rate?
The new, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, the new rate will not reference sanitary sewers.
Okay, it will just be equal to that previous amount that was I don't want to say misallocated, but perhaps mislabeled as to its use.
Yes, it will be called the Class A local improvement rate, Class A pavement.
Okay, and it will be comprised of the amount that is currently in the levy for that collection.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm clear on the amendment now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Did you want to offer anything else on the amendment, Mr. Elliott, from staff's perspective?
No, Mr. Mayor, the staff is quite happy to take council's direction in this matter. We just kind of put it all out there, and whatever council's so chooses is fine by us. We can apply it.
Okay. Council, do you have any additional questions on the amendment? So we're going to call a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? The amendment's carried. The motion is now amended. Any additional discussion on the main motion that as amended? Seeing none, we'll call a vote on the main motion as amended. All in favor? Main motion is carried. Thank you.
Councillor Christian and Councillor Hollingsworth, it appears you've lost connectivity. I assume you're voting. Okay.
Yeah, they're both in favor.
Okay. And that will bring us to bylaws.
Okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian, resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date December 14, 2020 be approved.
All in favor? That motion's carried.
And a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth that this council now adjourn.
Approved. Oh, sorry. All in favor? That motion is carried. I want to wish everybody in the community again the best of the holiday season. Much happiness and health to your families and friends. Thank you.
Merry Christmas to all.
Merry Christmas.
Take care, everybody.